All right, let's bring in Dan Perry in Tel Aviv. He's the former regional editor for the Associated Press in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Dan, it's good to talk to you. Thanks for your time today. Why is Israel pursuing this, the shutting down or crippling of UNRWA?
Well, I think they have a variety of claims against UNRWA, beginning with the notion that UNRWA basically looks the other way as its staffers work part-time or maybe full-time for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, all the way through UNRWA allowing its facilities or areas adjacent to its facilities to be used for munitions and indeed for operations of Hamas and Jihad, going through the fact that UNRWA in its schools allows, it isn't theirs, it's the PA's actually, but it allows a curriculum that Israel views, and I think reasonably views, as encouraging violence against Jews and non-acceptance of peace with Israel. And beyond that, I think there is a larger issue which is impractical, but not philosophically impossible, which is that UNRWA, in its various manifestations, perpetuates basically the invention of a permanent refugee in the case of the Palestinians, and creates a dependency of a sort that is indeed in opposition to the UNHCR's definition of a refugee, which is not fourth generation or fifth or sixth after someone has been forced out of their homes. But generally speaking, I would agree that it's highly impractical, because no matter what you can say about it, and I think a lot of Israel's claims are true, right now, UNRWA does play a role in providing services to the Palestinians in Gaza in particular, which were it to be blocked from providing, someone else would have to, and it probably would be Israel. There is an argument for allowing the Palestinian Authority to move into Gaza and maybe giving it maximal aid so that they could do these services, because it is indeed ridiculous that a UN refugee agency is doing it. But of course, Israel refuses to allow the PA to go into Gaza either. So what can I say? We have a messy situation.
Dan, there's a lot there. I don't know if we'll have time to get to everything, but I'll start with the first thing you said, which was the Israeli claim that UNRWA looks the other way as employees work for armed groups, Hamas's armed wing, Islamic Jihad, etc. I mean, that's just not true, though. They don't look the other way. There have been 2 investigations. If we want to go down to the nitty-gritty, earlier this year, Israel accused 12 people, and then it added a couple more to the list. So in all, Israel has accused 19 people of UNRWA's 13,000 staff in Gaza of taking part in October 7th attack. That triggered 2 massive investigations, one independent one within the UN. I have the results of the investigation in front of me, and all the people that Israel said had been involved in October 7th, they were immediately dismissed. So it's just not true to say that UNRWA looks the other way.
Hold on, Cyril. Okay, they were dismissed after it was exposed. I've seen claims, I've seen the reports. I've also been on the ground, and I sort of know what goes on. Israel is unhappy with the entire scenario we discussed, including it doesn't suffice with the dismissal of people after it's been discovered. They are livid at the fact that teachers in UNRWA schools, at least in one case, were understood to be holding hostages. They are apoplectic about the fact that UNRWA facilities are somehow used, even tangentially, to assist in Hamas and Jihad. Now, I also know that UNRWA is such a large organization that in a situation as you have in Gaza, where a maniacally dictatorial regime imposes compromises on people, you're gonna have such cases. I realize all of them, and beyond even that sort of excuse, I would have to ask Israel, what do you propose be done? You're not happy with the UNRWA schools. You're not happy with UNRWA's behavior and its acquiescence to imposition of X, Y, and Z by Hamas. I get all that, but what's the alternative? Like a lot of what Israel is currently doing, I fear there's a lot of what they don't agree with, but not enough of what they propose in exchange. I've made my case for what I think should be happening. Israel should be, yes, holding firm to its insistence that Hamas not be allowed to return to Gaza, to power in Gaza. That's primarily in the interest of the poor Palestinians. But they should be taking active steps already after a year of this insanity to create a better day after.
You said that UNRWA makes Palestinians permanent refugees, and that is somehow unfair for Israel. So if I understand your logic, but you can correct me if I'm...
It's unfair to the Palestinians.
Go ahead.
I think it's wrong.
What's wrong?
In the case of the Palestinians, certain actions are taken to perpetuate a dependency on a UN court, on a UN body, and to enable the fiction that people who are 5 generations removed from refugees are still refugees. If you've ever been to Gaza, and I have, these are shanty towns that should have been long ago normalized and fixed, and the Palestinians deserve monumental aid to help them elevate themselves into a status where they're ready for independence and sovereignty, which they deserve, as opposed to maintaining the fiction that someone born to a parent in Gaza, who was born to a grandparent in Gaza, who lived in Gaza for 7 generations, is a refugee. That definition and that attitude doesn't apply to any other conflict on earth.
Well,
and the perpetuation
this
of
conflict
nonsense
is pretty unique.
part of the problem.
So what you're saying is that the hold on. Let me just get this in. So what you're saying is the logic is Israel. Essentially, the world should remove the problem of Palestinian refugees for Israel. You're saying we should stop calling them refugees because it's been a long time.
I'm saying it's unhelpful to anyone to have them even thinking they're refugees. They should be aided as people who need aid. The refugee definition is nonsensical, and it is contradictory to the UN's own definition of a refugee, which is not hereditary. So we have a fundamental narrative problem here, which creates difficulty on the political side.
You don't shut down an agency of 13,000 people because there's evidence against 9 people.
We can spend 20 minutes reading the report, and I can tell you Israel has its own reasons why it dismisses that report and thinks it was an internal whitewash. It doesn't matter. UNRWA
there was an
has
external report as well.
So many thousands of people in Gaza that I would assume that inevitably, some of them, given that Hamas has so infiltrated everything in Gaza, are going to have connections to Hamas. That impresses me a lot less than some of the other stuff, like the munitions bases in schools and also, by the way, in mosques. But all of that becomes inevitable when you're ruled by an Islamist fundamentalist mafia. The situation in Gaza is totally insane. And all these quibbles over who did what are not going to get us anywhere. And what is really needed at this point is certainly not Israel's action in the Knesset against UNRWA. That's clear. What is needed is a plan to end the war. Right now, we have a desperate blockade where Israel insists on a return of the hostages, and Hamas insists that only return the hostages if Israel pulls out of Gaza and ends the war. Pulling out of Gaza for Israel, allowing what remains of Hamas to be in charge in Gaza, is something they will not do. And I don't think most of the Palestinians in Gaza want them to do that, because most Palestinians in Gaza, and again, I've been there, want to be ruled by Hamas about as much as you do, Cyril, or most of the people in Saudi Arabia. So, by the way, one useful thing that could happen is for Qatar to actually use its leverage on Hamas and say that the time is done for your misadventure in Gaza.
What's Qatar got to do with any of this?
Hold on, please, let me finish. We will give you asylum in Qatar. We will do everything that can be done for the Palestinian people, and that would require equivalent pressure on the rather foolish government of Netanyahu to agree to the only possible day-after plan, which is to return some version of the Palestinian Authority to Gaza. Qatar could be very, very useful here, and just like you, as far as I know, they're not applying that pressure. Now, do they really want to continue to be the enablers of a terrorist group that is perpetuating the disaster that they began for the Palestinian people and for the entire region? So I would like to see a complete and total paradigm shift here. Meanwhile, of course, I'm not going to be on your channel justifying the idiotic Israeli effort to pressure UNRWA this way when they don't have a commensurate needed effort to come up with something better than UNRWA. UNRWA needs to be reformed, no doubt about it. But to be banned is nonsense, and the criticism of that move is right. But I'm saying we might want to elevate the discussion to something a bit more practical and I believe plausible. Because think about it. Who possibly wants Hamas to remain in power in Gaza? It's an absurdity. I don't think anyone in your studio wants that. I don't think the Palestinians want that. But there's so much pretending, and the time has come, I think, for a little truthfulness. Wouldn't you agree?
I got to run. It's not that I don't want to listen to your points. It's just that that's the time we have for today, okay?
All right. Thanks for having me on.
No, absolutely. We'll have you on again. Thank you very much.